The holographic display flickered to life, casting an ethereal green glow across the stark white conference room. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood motionless, her dark eyes reflecting the intricate botanical network spreading across the three-dimensional map. Tendrils of bioluminescent data traced the complex relationships between Earth's most dangerous plant species, a living, breathing defense system that most would mistake for a collection of toxic curiosities. Outside the reinforced windows of the United Earth Botanical Defense Command, the Concordance diplomatic vessel hung like a massive obsidian shard against the pale blue sky. Its arrival had been anticipated, but not welcomed. Humanity had long been considered a marginal species by the galactic community, primitive, unremarkable, barely worth acknowledging. Captain Krell of the Concordance Diplomatic Corps entered the briefing room, his reptilian form towering over the human representatives. His scales shifted color with each movement, a biological display of emotional states that humans found both fascinating and unsettling. Translation implants hummed to life, converting his native language into crisp, almost mechanical English. "We've reviewed your preliminary reports," Krell began, his forked tongue flickering briefly between sentences. "The Concordance finds your planetary ecological systems quaint." Elena didn't flinch. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up detailed molecular structures of plant species that would kill most sentient beings with a mere touch. The nightshade variants from the Andean mountains, the neurotoxin-producing fungi from the Congo Basin, the paralytic moss cultures from the deepest Siberian forests. "Quaint," she repeated, her voice devoid of emotion. An interesting choice of words. The other diplomatic representatives shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Marcus Chen, head of Xenobiological Integration, leaned forward. "What Captain Krell means," he said diplomatically, "is that our botanical systems appear rudimentary by galactic standards." Krell's translator rendered a sound that might have been a laugh. "Rudimentary. These are nothing more than poison gardens. On any advanced world, such dangerous botanical specimens would be completely eradicated or strictly controlled." Elena's lips curved into the slightest of smiles. The holographic display began to pulse, each plant species revealing intricate molecular networks that seemed to dance and reshape themselves. What looked like simple toxic specimens were actually living, adaptive systems far more complex than any traditional weapon. Unbeknownst to the Concordance delegation, microscopic botanical sensors were already analyzing their genetic structures. Invisible spore samples drifted through the ventilation system, collecting data, preparing defenses that would make traditional weapons look like children's toys. "Control," Elena said softly, "is a matter of perspective." The Concordance team didn't realize they were already being studied, not just observed, but systematically analyzed by a planetary defense network that saw them as nothing more than another potential threat to be understood and, if necessary, neutralized. Captain Krell approached the holographic display, his massive frame casting a shadow over the intricate botanical map. He reached out, almost dismissively, to touch one of the projected plant structures. Elena's hand shot out. "I wouldn't," but it was too late. A micro-layer of adaptive spores detached from the holographic projection, responding to the alien's genetic signature. The reaction was instantaneous but microscopic. Data collection protocols that the Concordance wouldn't even recognize as an attack. "Fascinating," Krell muttered, completely unaware that he had just been comprehensively sampled by a defense system more sophisticated than any weapon in the galaxy. Outside, storm clouds began to gather. On the horizon, something was changing. The plants were watching, and they were ready. The research facility stood like a cathedral of green, its massive geodesic domes rising from the Chilean mountainside. Zardik, chief xenobiologist of the Concordance, stepped from the pressurized transport with an air of academic superiority. His team of 5 researchers moved with calculated precision, their environmental suits gleaming under the morning sun. "Preliminary scans indicate nothing extraordinary," muttered Sinhua, Zardik's lead assistant, her multispectral analyzer sweeping across the facility's exterior. Standard Botanical Research Center. Primitive containment protocols. Dr. Elena Rodriguez waited at the entrance, her posture betraying nothing of the intricate trap being prepared. Behind her, rows of sealed cultivation chambers stretched into the distance, each one a potential nightmare for unprepared alien researchers. "Welcome to the Planetary Botanical Defense Research Center," Elena said, her voice measured. "I trust your journey was comfortable." Zarek's translator rendered her words with clinical precision. His four-chambered eyes blinked in a complex pattern of academic dismissal. "We've studied thousands of planetary ecosystems. Your facility is quaint." The research team followed Elena through a series of airlocks. Each chamber they passed contained increasingly bizarre plant specimens. Vines that seemed to pulse with an internal rhythm. Fungi networks that sparkled with bioluminescent communication. Flowers that appeared to track the researchers' movements with unsettling precision. Xinhua couldn't resist reaching out to scan a particularly intricate vine specimen. Her environmental suit's sensors began to go haywire. "I wouldn't," Elena started. The vine moved. In a microsecond, microscopic tendrils penetrated Xinhua's environmental suit. The researcher froze, her body going rigid. Not from fear, but from a precisely targeted neurotoxin that was already analyzing her entire genetic structure. "Fascinating," Zarek muttered, completely misunderstanding the situation. "A primitive defensive mechanism. Rudimentary at best." Elena watched coldly. "We don't just grow plants," she said. "We cultivate living strategies." The research team's medical scanners went into overdrive. The vine's toxin wasn't killing Xinhua. It was mapping her entire biological system with terrifying precision. Each molecule of the neurotoxin was collecting data, understanding the alien physiology at a level no conventional weapon could achieve. Zarek approached the immobilized researcher, his scientific curiosity overriding any sense of concern. "Remarkable neural interference," he mumbled, running a scanner over Xinhua's frozen form. "Completely non-lethal, yet total motor control suppression." What he didn't realize was that the plant was doing far more than just immobilizing its target. In the sealed research chamber, other plant specimens began to react. Tendrils of bioluminescent communication spread through hidden networks. Microscopic spore clusters began to reconfigure, storing the genetic information of the alien researcher. "She'll be fine," Elena said matter-of-factly. "The plant is simply learning." Hours later, Xinhua would recover, her body unchanged. But somewhere in the vast botanical network of the research center, her entire genetic signature had been cataloged, studied, and filed away as potential future defense data. Zarek continued to take readings, completely oblivious to the fact that he and his entire team were now part of the most sophisticated biological intelligence gathering system in the galaxy. "Primitive," he repeated to himself. "Absolutely primitive." Behind him, the plants continued to watch, to learn, to prepare. The Concordance blockade stretched across Earth's orbital space like a metal noose. Thousands of ships, their obsidian hulls gleaming with advanced weaponry, cut off every potential trade route. Major Zhang Wei stood in the United Earth Ecological Defense Command, watching the holographic displays that tracked the economic stranglehold. "They think they can break us," she muttered to Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who stood beside her, fingers dancing across a complex botanical interface. The initial reports were grim. Critical mineral imports, blocked. Advanced technological components, interdicted. Rare earth elements essential for high-tech manufacturing, completely cut off. But the Concordance made one fatal mistake. They assumed human vulnerability meant human weakness. Deep beneath the Atacama Desert, the first transformation began. What looked like abandoned hydroponics facilities were actually the most advanced ecological engineering centers in human history. As traditional supply lines collapsed, these underground complexes hummed to life with a purpose far beyond simple food production. Dr. Marcus Chen supervised a team of genetic engineers and ecological specialists. Their latest project, a series of plant variants that could do the impossible, was about to be tested. Mineral synthesis complete, a technician called out. On the massive cultivation screens, genetically modified lichen began to break down complex rock formations, extracting rare minerals with terrifying efficiency. What would take traditional mining operations months now happened in hours. In another section of the facility, bioluminescent algae cultures started producing complex organic compounds, medicines, fuel, advanced polymers. Each culture was a living factory, adaptive and intelligent. Major Zhang watched the data streams with a predator's intensity. "They want to starve us," she said. "We'll show them how life adapts." The Concordance blockade was comprehensive, but comprehensively stupid. They saw Earth as a singular system that could be strangled by cutting off external resources. They didn't understand that humanity had long ago learned to turn every potential weakness into a strength. Underground hydroponics expanded exponentially. Genetic engineers worked in perfect sync with botanists, creating plant variants that defied conventional understanding. A single square meter of carefully cultivated ecosystem could now produce what would previously have required hectares of traditional agriculture. Zarek, still studying human botanical systems, sent increasingly frustrated reports back to the Concordance leadership. His latest transmission revealed something that terrified his superiors. The humans are not suffering. They are evolving. When Concordance scanning ships attempted to map Earth's surface, they encountered something impossible. The planet's ecological network had become a living camouflage system. Entire forest regions could shift their electromagnetic signatures. Grassland ecosystems could redirect scanning beams. What looked like a simple planetary surface was actually a dynamic, intelligent defense mechanism. Elena Rodriguez allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "They thought they could cut us off," she told Major Zhang. "They don't understand that for humans, isolation is just another problem to solve." The first wave of new synthesized materials began rolling out of the underground facilities. Minerals extracted from living systems, medicines produced by intelligent plant cultures, energy generated through biological processes so efficient they made traditional power generation look like a child's science project. The blockade continued. The Concordance believed they were winning. They had no idea they were watching humanity's greatest transformation. In the Atacama facility, Dr. Chen looked up from his latest genetic sequencing project. "We're ready," he said simply. The plants were listening, and they were about to show the galaxy what true adaptation meant. The first Concordance patrol arrived with the arrogance of a species that had never known true defeat. 6 sleek warships, each capable of obliterating entire planetary defenses, dropped out of faster-than-light transit at the edge of Earth's solar system. Captain Varax, a veteran of 100 conquests, studied the tactical displays with practiced indifference. Preliminary scans show no significant defensive capabilities, his tactical officer reported. The holographic display showed Earth as nothing more than a blue-green dot, seemingly defenseless, ripe for subjugation. They were wrong. The attack began so subtly that the Concordance ships didn't realize they were under assault until it was too late. The first hint came when microscopic spore clouds began to infiltrate the ship's environmental systems. These weren't simple biological contaminants. They were living intelligence networks, each spore a data collection point, each particle a potential weapon. On the lead ship's bridge, Captain Varax watched in growing horror as his communication systems began to degrade. Not through conventional electronic warfare, but through something far more terrifying. Living organisms were systematically breaking down the ship's electromagnetic interfaces. "Impossible," he muttered. Aboard the United Earth Botanical Defense Command, Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the engagement with clinical precision. Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces that looked more like living ecosystems than traditional computer systems. "Dispersal pattern alpha," she commanded softly. Across the solar system, Earth's defensive network came alive. What looked like simple planetary ecosystems were actually the most sophisticated biological warfare systems ever conceived. Asteroid belts became living barriers. Orbital regions transformed into adaptive defensive networks. The concordant ships began to die. Not through conventional weapons, not through energy discharges or missile strikes, but through complete biological subversion. Fungal networks infiltrated critical ship systems. Adaptive spore clouds began to learn and redirect the ship's own energy signatures against them. Each vessel became a dying organism, consumed from the inside by living weapons that defied all conventional understanding of warfare. Major Zhang Wei watched the tactical displays, her expression unchanged. "They thought we were defenseless," she said to no one in particular. They didn't understand that for humans, every ecosystem is a potential weapon. The fifth ship attempted to retreat. Its faster-than-light drive began to activate, and then simply dissolved. Living organisms had systematically broken down its critical components, rendering faster-than-light travel impossible. Captain Varax's final transmission was a mixture of terror and incomprehension. "What are you?" He managed to broadcast before his ship's communication systems were completely consumed by adaptive biological networks. Elena Rodriguez allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "We're humans," she said softly to the empty command center. "And we've been preparing for this moment for a very long time." When the concordance analysis teams would later review the engagement, they would find something impossible to comprehend. These weren't simple defensive systems. Each ship's destruction was a carefully orchestrated biological ballet. Every system failure was a learning moment. Every lost vessel was a data point in humanity's growing understanding of ecological warfare. The plants had been watching. The plants had been learning. And now, the plants were fighting back. Earth continued to orbit its sun, looking for all the universe like an innocent blue-green marble. Nothing could be further from the truth. The full Concordance invasion fleet blotted out the stars. 12,000 warships converged on Earth, a metallic storm that would have obliterated any known civilization in the galaxy. Admiral Krasnak, the Concordance's most decorated military strategist, stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion's Talon, confident of an imminent victory. Total planetary subjugation in 6 standard hours, he announced to his command crew. Holographic displays showed Earth as a vulnerable target. No visible defense systems, no massive orbital weapons, nothing but a seemingly defenseless blue-green planet. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The first wave of landing ships descended through the atmosphere. Massive troop carriers filled with biomechanically enhanced soldiers, each equipped with the most advanced combat technology in the known galaxy. They expected resistance. They expected a fight. They did not expect the planet itself to fight back. In the Amazon rainforest, root networks hundreds of miles long began to move. Not slowly, as plants typically would, but with a speed and intelligence that defied every known biological law. Massive tree systems redirected underground water reserves, creating instantaneous sinkholes that swallowed entire landing zones. Major Zhang Wei watched from the United Earth Ecological Warfare Command, her fingers dancing across interfaces that looked more like living organisms than traditional computer systems. "Grassland Defense Protocol," she commanded. Across the African savanna, what looked like ordinary grasslands transformed. Each blade became a potential weapon. Microscopic spore clusters launched into the air, targeting specific alien biochemistries with terrifying precision. Entire landing zones became killing fields of living botanical intelligence. On the Dominion's Talon, Admiral Krasnak watched in growing horror as his tactical displays began to fail. These weren't simple defensive systems. This was a planetary immune response. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's voice crackled over the global defense network. "They wanted to see what humans are capable of," she said softly. "Now they'll learn." In the Siberian tundra, moss cultures that had survived for thousands of years suddenly became active. Adaptive networks that could redirect electromagnetic signatures, creating massive blind spots in the Concordance's scanning systems. Entire invasion corridors simply disappeared from their tactical maps. The plants were fighting, and they were winning. Fungal networks in the Antarctic research stations began to generate complex electromagnetic interference. Communication systems failed. Navigation became impossible. Each alien ship found itself increasingly isolated, cut off from support, surrounded by a living planetary defense network. "This is impossible," Admiral Krasnak muttered, watching another landing zone simply dissolve into a complex ecosystem of adaptive botanical weapons. Zarek, the xenobiologist who had initially studied human botanical systems, watched the invasion unfold with a mixture of terror and academic fascination. His earlier reports had warned the Concordance leadership, but nobody had believed him. Now, they were paying the price. Each planetary ecosystem was a weapon. Forests released neurotoxin clouds. Grasslands generated paralytic spores. Fungal networks redirected entire invasion routes. The planet wasn't just defending itself, it was hunting. "They're not just plants," Zarek whispered to himself. "They're a living, thinking defense system." As night fell, the invasion fleet began to realize something terrifying. They weren't conquering a planet. The planet was consuming them. The negotiation chamber was unlike anything the Concordance had ever encountered. Instead of a sterile diplomatic room, they found themselves in a living, breathing environment. Transparent walls revealed intricate botanical systems that seemed to pulse with an intelligence far beyond simple plant life. Vines traced complex mathematical patterns along the walls. Bioluminescent fungi created subtle lighting that shifted with the emotional tenor of the conversation. Grand Diplomat Korax of the Concordance tried to maintain his composure, but his four-chambered heart raced beneath his armored exoskeleton. The human delegation consisted of just 3 individuals: Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Major Zhang Wei, and Dr. Marcus Chen. They looked almost casual, as if discussing a routine trade agreement rather than the fate of entire civilizations. "Your invasion has been conclusively addressed," Elena began, her voice calm and clinical. A nearby plant seemed to lean toward her, its tendrils moving in what could only be described as an attentive posture. Korax's translator struggled to convey the nuanced mix of terror and respect in his native language. "We seek to understand," he managed, "how a supposedly primitive species could unleash such a comprehensive defensive system." Dr. Chen stepped forward, holographic displays springing to life around him. Each image showed a different ecosystem: the Amazon rainforest, the Siberian tundra, the African savanna. But they were no longer just landscapes. They were living, thinking defense networks. "Primitive," Chen repeated. "We don't see ecosystems as separate entities. We see them as living, interconnected intelligence networks." The Concordance delegation watched in growing horror as the displays showed how each plant, each microscopic organism, had been part of a planet-wide defense mechanism. What they had considered a simple invasion target was actually a single, massive living organism. Major Zhang demonstrated how grassland ecosystems could redirect entire invasion routes, how fungal networks could disable advanced technological systems, how a simple moss culture could generate electromagnetic interference that could blind entire fleets. "Your technology is impressive," Zhang said, "but it's linear, predictable. Our ecosystems adapt. They learn. They fight." Zarek, the xenobiologist who had first studied human botanical systems, stepped forward. His previous reports had been dismissed as academic fantasy. Now they were being proven horrifyingly accurate. "Each ecosystem is a weapon," he explained to his own leadership. "But more than that, each ecosystem is a thinking system. They don't just defend, they understand." The negotiation wasn't about surrender. It was about comprehension. Elena Rodriguez placed her hand on a nearby plant. Its tendrils responded, tracing complex patterns that appeared to be some form of communication. "We're not just growing plants," she said softly. "We're cultivating intelligence." The Concordance leadership realized something terrifying. Humanity wasn't just a species. It was a complex, adaptive, planetary intelligence that saw potential where others saw only threat. Korax's final question came out almost as a whisper. How long have you been preparing? Alina's smile was both an answer and a warning. Always, she said simply. The plants continued to pulse, to watch, to learn. And somewhere, deep in the planetary ecosystem, something continued to grow, something that understood far more than anyone realized. The negotiation was just beginning. The news spread faster than light communication could travel. Not through official channels, but through the intricate network of interstellar traders, xenobiologists, and explorers who formed the true information highway of the galaxy. Humanity had done the impossible. On 1,000 different worlds, in countless alien research centers and diplomatic chambers, the story was told and retold. How a supposedly primitive species had turned an entire planet into a living, thinking weapon. How botanical systems had become the most sophisticated defense mechanism ever encountered. Zarek found himself at the center of an academic storm. His previous research, once dismissed as theoretical nonsense, was now the most studied scientific document in the known galaxy. Xenobiological research centers scrambled to understand the human approach to ecological engineering. It's not just defense, he explained in a series of increasingly viral academic presentations. It's a fundamental reimagining of what life can be. The Concordance's reputation lay in ruins. What had been the most feared military force in the galaxy was now seen as fundamentally obsolete. Their technological superiority meant nothing against a species that could turn an entire planet into a living, thinking defense mechanism. Dr. Alina Rodriguez became an unexpected celebrity across multiple alien civilizations. Her lectures on planetary ecological intelligence were broadcast on thousands of worlds. She wasn't just explaining a defensive strategy. She was introducing an entirely new way of understanding life itself. We don't see boundaries, she would explain to increasingly packed lecture halls of alien academics. Where you see a plant, we see a communication network. Where you see an ecosystem, we see an intelligence. Major Zhang Wei found herself fielding diplomatic requests from species that had previously ignored humanity entirely. Advanced civilizations wanted to understand how humans had developed such a comprehensive ecological defense system. The truth was both simpler and more complex than anyone could understand. Humanity hadn't developed the system. They had simply learned to listen. On Earth, the botanical research continued. Underground facilities expanded. Genetic engineers worked alongside ecological specialists, creating plant variants that could do things previously thought impossible. Each new breakthrough was another step in understanding the complex intelligence that existed just beneath the surface of every ecosystem. Dr. Marcus Chen's latest research showed how a single square meter of carefully cultivated ecosystem could now produce more raw materials, more energy, more medical compounds than entire industrial complexes of other species. We're not conquering nature, Chen would explain. We're partnering with it. The galactic academic community was transformed. Entire fields of study were rewritten. Xenobiological research shifted from studying life as separate systems to understanding life as interconnected, adaptive intelligence. Zarek's final report to the Concordance leadership was both a warning and a revelation. Humanity is not a species, he wrote. It is a planetary intelligence that has learned to communicate through the most complex system we have ever encountered. Their plants are not weapons, they are thoughts. They are memories. They are a living, thinking network that sees potential where others see only threat. The plants continued to grow, to learn, to adapt. And somewhere, deep in the planetary ecosystem, something was watching. Something was waiting. Something was preparing for the next stage of a transformation that had only just begun. The Galactic Ecological Summit was unlike any diplomatic gathering in recorded history. Representatives from over 200 different species gathered in a massive biodome that was itself a living, breathing ecosystem. What looked like conference halls were actually carefully cultivated botanical environments that shifted and adapted with each conversation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of it all, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the intricate communication networks of planetary ecosystems from across the known galaxy. Her presentation was less a lecture and more a revelation. Ecology is not just science, she explained, her voice calm and precise. It's the most sophisticated form of intelligence we've discovered. Zarek, now a respected xenobiological advisor, stood nearby. His once dismissive attitude had transformed into something closer to reverence. The alien species that had once sought to conquer humanity now came seeking understanding. Representatives from the Concordance sat in carefully designed chairs that were actually living plant structures. Each delegation member was surrounded by botanical interfaces that responded to their biological signatures, providing real-time environmental data, emotional regulation, and communication support. Dr. Marcus Chen demonstrated how human botanical technologies could transform entire planetary ecosystems. A holographic display showed barren worlds being transformed by intelligent plant networks, deserts becoming vibrant, living systems, toxic environments cleaned and restored by adaptive botanical intelligence. We're not just sharing technology, Chen explained. We're sharing a philosophy of life. Major John Wei presented the military delegates with a comprehensive overview of ecological defense systems, but this was no traditional weapons presentation. Instead, she showed how entire planetary defenses could be created through symbiotic relationships between different life forms. The most surprising revelations came from the smallest details. A representative from a methane-based life system watched in awe as Elena demonstrated how human botanical research could create communication networks that bridged seemingly incompatible biological systems, plants that could translate between different forms of life, ecosystems that could adapt to multiple environmental conditions simultaneously. Your species sees boundaries, Elena said, her hand touching a living holographic display that responded like a living organism. We see connections. The summit was more than a diplomatic meeting. It was a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. Zarek's latest research showed how human botanical systems were now being studied across the galaxy. Universities were being restructured. Entire fields of scientific research were being rewritten. What was once considered fringe theory was now mainstream understanding. Humanity didn't conquer the galaxy, he explained to a group of fascinated researchers. They showed the galaxy how to communicate. As the summit progressed, something extraordinary began to happen. The botanical interfaces in the conference dome began to communicate with each other, not through traditional means, but through complex ecological networks that transcended individual species. A representative from a silicon-based civilization watched in growing wonder as plant-based communication systems began to create complex mathematical patterns that seemed to bridge different forms of intelligence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez allowed herself the smallest of smiles. The plants continued to grow, to learn, to communicate, and somewhere, deep in the complex networks of planetary intelligence, something was watching. Something was understanding. Something was preparing for the next stage of a transformation that had only just begun.